first slide explains a lot about using WebEx. First of all, make sure you click on Connect to Audio to actually hear us and talk later during the Q&A session. And you can go to Quick Start on the top menu and click on Connect to Audio. If you lose your internet connection, you can just reconnect using the email we sent you. The link will be there. So don't panic, just reconnect. You can adjust your audio on audio settings at the top menu as well. And you can ask me questions, I'm Anna, anytime using the chat box on the right-hand side of the screen. And if you're calling using a phone, please make sure you're using a landline, because sometimes mobile phones can be tricky and you might lose the connection or interfere with the connection of the webinar. And a recording of this webinar will be available to everyone on wingsweb.org. And just so you can have a visual here, so if you go to Quick Start at the top menu and then Connect to Audio, and if you want to ask questions during the Q&A or at any point during the webinar, you can just write your question on the chat box on the right-hand side of the screen. And to our webinar and our topic today, we'll be talking about the SDG Philanthropy Platform. Well, as most of you probably know, the Sustainable Development Goals are being introduced next year to replace the Millennium Development Goals. And it has been a very participatory process from the start. And how civil society and society in general can contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals has been an issue that has been discussed a lot. So now we're here and looking into the role of philanthropy specifically, and how can philanthropic organizations work with the Sustainable Development Goals. And I'll be your facilitator today. Again, Anna Pinho. If you have any questions, you can just send them to me on the chat box, or you can email anything to me if you have any questions or any problems during the webinar. Speaking with us today about this important topic, we have Heather Grady from Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors, Karolina Mzyk from UNDP, and Lauren Bradford from the Foundation Center. Anna Marie Argelado sends her apologies, but unfortunately she's not feeling well this morning. And you can send me any questions you have to her if you have any specific questions, and I'll make sure to send it over to her and answer them. Okay, thank you. So, Heather, go to you.
Okay, I think we might want to go to a different slide that introduces the platform a little bit before this. I wonder, Anna, if we have one other slide to start with?
Sure.
Okay. Could you go to the next slide, please?
And you'll be able to do that in a second. Yes. Now you should be able to move them.
Okay. I wonder if you might forward it for me.
And if you move the arrows, on your presentation, or I can move the slides for you if that might be easier.
Yes, that would be easier.
Sure. Here.
Thank you. Okay, so just to go to say what we'll be talking about today, first a little bit of a scene setting about why this year is so important, and I'm sure many of the listeners are already familiar with this. Talk about a little bit of the movement from the Millennium Development Goals, the MDGs, to the Sustainable Development Goals, and then our philanthropy platform. And its applicability to grant making. We've talked about this within our own organization and with many others, and then needs and opportunities of grant makers. So Anna, next slide. So Just to say a few words about the Millennium Development Goals, they arose out of the Millennium Declaration of the year 2000. They have been in effect really for 15 years. There were 8 of them. They focus mostly on the social sector, and really they came out of a very lofty declaration, but were not that easy to implement because the goals were so significant. But what they really showed was when organizations, when governments, UN agencies, and other organizations cohere in their effort, they can make significant progress. A lot of progress was made on tackling HIV/AIDS, for example, and improving primary education rates. But in any case, they are unfinished business, and the Sustainable Development Goals launch is a great opportunity to move forward. The MDGs come to an end at the end of December, and the Sustainable Development Goals launch on January 1st next year. Next slide. There are 17 of them. There are many things that are better about the Sustainable Development Goals, and I'll just mention a few. First of all, they were created through a massive process of consultation around the world, unlike the MDGs. Secondly, the 17 SDGs provide a holistic approach to human development and protecting our planet, linking social, economic, and environmental issues. Third, they're universal and apply to all countries in the world, so really reflect a new paradigm for sustainable development and human well-being. Fourth, the MDGs largely ignored inequality, but the SDGs have an explicit goal on reducing inequality within and between countries. And finally, the MDGs did not really emphasize good governance and corruption issues, but the SDGs focus on that explicitly and really link in other issues like peace building. Next slide, please. Within the 17 goals are 169 targets, and so I've just highlighted a couple of examples here. Goal 4 is on quality education. But individual targets might include, for example, early childhood education, ranging everything from that to tertiary education, and making sure that we're educating our youth for employment. On climate change, there's an emphasis on both mitigation and adaptation issues. So again, what we feel in terms of what it offers to philanthropy is a much broader array of goals that different foundations and philanthropists are interested in. Next slide, please. So a number of organizations, but key to them really, United Nations Development Program, the Foundation Center, and Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors have come together over the last year and created something originally known as the Post-2015 Partnership Platform for Philanthropy, but now we've renamed it the SDG Philanthropy Platform. So we're the 3 implementing organizations with very generous seed support from the Hilton Foundation, the Ford Foundation, and the MasterCard Foundation. And we're finding a number of foundations are increasingly interested in participating. This is because this platform offers a much easier way for philanthropy to become more integrated into the Sustainable Development Goals process. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. There are 2 main goals or overall aims of this platform. The first is really just giving philanthropy a greater understanding of the post-2015 agenda and the goals. And the second is really ensuring that the UN system and governments and others understand the role of philanthropy better and what philanthropy can offer to achievement of these goals over the next 15 years between now and 2030. Next slide, please. We have a number of objectives to create a means for philanthropy to engage as a real partner in the SDGs, to create new methods of outreach and really enable philanthropy to be better connected at the national and global level. And Karolina Mzyk from UNDP will talk more about this. And to make data on philanthropic investments more visible to others who would like to use it, to make sure that we are sharing our stories so that we build more collaboration. Because our real underlying thesis is that greater collaboration will in fact result in better and more impact on people's lives. Just to mention, we started with 4 pilot countries. We launched in Kenya last year, and this year in Indonesia, Colombia, and Ghana. And we're very interested in expanding to more countries in the coming years. Next slide, please. So this just shows some of the rationales why we think philanthropy should engage. Because it's a universal and broad agenda, because we can influence the operating environment that philanthropy exists in, to increase our effectiveness, and so on. And really the strengths that I'm sure all of our listeners know that philanthropy can offer. We can take more risks. We are often very good at convening and alliance building. There are a number of benefits that philanthropy can bring, but really the starting point is connecting and knowing where to get information and how to find others who are working in the same area. Next slide, please. Again, this is just indicating who are our implementers, funders, and partners, and in every country where we've launched, we have had strong support from the local philanthropic community. Next slide. I think here I will turn over to my colleague Karolina, so I look forward to any questions and comments during the discussion section. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Heather. That was an overview of the SDGs. It was interesting to see the difference between them and the MDGs and the focus on collaboration. So you can't get anywhere without collaboration. And to be interesting to hear later on the Q&A session about the pilot countries and if there are any other countries you're looking into or which ones specifically. Karolina?
Yes, I'm here, and now I am a presenter. Okay, so I'll move back.
Yeah.
Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I am in Istanbul, so greetings from this beautiful city. And I will talk about enabling environment and the value added for philanthropy and the UN system and governments to work together at the global country level on the thematic issues. So first, I will go back a little bit and complement to what Heather already said. And one important message that we would like to underline and emphasize in our work with philanthropy is that we have already a lot of lessons learned from the MDGs. MDGs have been there for 15 years, and to start with, they have been really slow to take off because probably the government started really thinking about implementing their policies and thinking about how to integrate in the national development plans within the after 2005. But we really accelerated towards 2010. So we have a lot of lessons learned, and hopefully the SDGs will not take such a long time to take off the ground. What Heather already said, MDGs have been a great success. They have been the greatest anti-poverty movement around the world. And there are a few lessons learned that I would like to bring in here in this conversation. And one is certainly about partnerships. The big success of the Millennium Development Goals would not have been possible without coordination between governments from the south, governments from the north, and the other thing is that effective partnerships have to be implemented at the country level. So that's lesson number one. The downside of this is that these partnerships have been actually quite limited, which means that the collaboration and coordination essentially happen between governments, bilateral donors, and to some very limited extent with business. But overall and large, civil society and even less foundations have been involved. Second thing, very important, is about monitoring and data. MDGs have really taught us that data is key to really measure what we treasure. And if we don't measure what is happening on the ground, that means it's not really taking place. So the MDG framework really strengthens the systems for data collection at the country level. And we need to build on this success in the Sustainable Development Goals, but we need to really expand because the ambition level of the SDGs is by far much bigger. My next slide is about the resourcing the SDGs, and I will speak about this in the context of the partnerships. Obviously, the overseas development assistance will remain a critical important element for countries, especially countries which have difficulties in raising domestic resources. Such as countries are definitely the least developed countries and countries in conflict or in post-conflict. But some of you might have heard about this big conference that took place in Addis Ababa in July, and there was a huge emphasis on domestic resource mobilization. That means governments should really be responsible and find ways to mobilize funds locally. What does this mean? Obviously, it means a lot of policy changes, a lot of understanding what are the roles of the governments, what is the role of the ODA in leveraging other resources, and what is the role of the private sector, civil society, and foundations to actually help the governments in navigate the course in implementing the Sustainable Development Goals. So, ODA is, just to give you an idea, the current ODA, or the ODA last year, was at the level of $135 billion, according to, this is just from the DAC donors, from the OECD countries, rich countries to the developing countries. And this number is obviously very underestimated, but that's the number that we use. However, the resources which will be needed to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, and again, that's an estimate, it's about $3.9 trillion a year. This estimate comes from UNCTAD, and it comes with a lot of caveats because we don't know, I mean, the SDGs will be there for 15 years, and we all know that a huge level of technological innovations will have to take place. So we don't really know what will be the numbers in subsequent years. But look what a big difference there is between what we have available in development community and what are the needs on SDGs. So, what does this mean for ODA? ODA has to play a catalytic role. It really has to change in function from really covering a lot of different programmatic areas to really play a role about injecting funds into areas that will mobilize many more partners, much more funding. And countries have to be very smart and understand how to navigate their own policy environment towards leveraging different types of new financing tools and financial instruments to pay for some of these investments. So in this case, partnerships and collaboration and coordination among the partners is much more important than ever. That's why when we are talking and when we are working within the SDG Philanthropy Platform, and we are structuring our partnerships between the government, the UN, philanthropy, and civil society partners, it's really certainly not about the money. Financial resources are important, but they are not the most important. The most important thing for the governments right now is to understand how they have to navigate to really unleash all the possible potential, other than just funding. Over the last year, since we have launched the platform, we have done a lot of interviews with our stakeholders in these 4 countries, like Heather mentioned, Kenya, Colombia, Indonesia, and Ghana. And these are some of the lessons learned that we have gathered in the context of why the collaboration and coordination between this partner is important. Number one is that there is a huge growing diversity of partners, proliferation of different types of partners. It's no longer just government, civil society, and the UN. It's really a huge number of different types of financial actors, which come with the different types of knowledge, resources, and networks, and also services. And all these different actors have to be really brought together to some form of coordinated action in order to avoid duplication of efforts and foster complementarity, because we certainly need all of their knowledge. Number 2 is that collaboration with governments and policymakers is important in order to achieve scale and sustainability. We have, over the last couple of months, prepared a report which very nicely summarizes our key lessons learned, and we have interviewed more than 60 people in these 4 countries, typically foundations, governments, and civil society. And what we have noticed is that philanthropies are working a lot with their local partners, and they are really very keen to innovate very good solutions at the grassroots level. But hardly ever these kind of very useful solutions are scaled, and very often they're not sustainable. And the way to go about it, we have understood, is really to make sure that foundations provide this bridge between civil society and governments, and then they themselves engage as well to make sure that these alternative solutions are brought to scale and they become sustainable. How it's possible? We must make sure that philanthropies are really systematically engaged in policy dialogues. One more thing which is very important is that we think that policy discussions, well, the next 2 years will be very important for launching the Sustainable Development Goals, and governments, some more actively, some less, will be really thinking about how to integrate these SDGs in their national development plans. And there will be a lot of policy dialogues, a lot of discussions, consultations. And we think that these consultations will be much more multi-stakeholder than before. One more important thing that is different than that will be different with SDGs compared to the MDGs will be that these dialogues will be much more driven based on lessons learned and experiences, and it will be much more about knowledge sharing and knowledge sharing from the grassroots level. That's why it's very important that philanthropies and civil societies really are aware and become partners in this policy dialogues. So what we're trying to do with the platform is to make sure that we develop structures where the foundations and civil society and their partners are in a systematic way engaged in these policy conversations with governments. Now, I cannot for some reason, is my time up? Because, oh yes, very good. This is the last slide, country level thematic collaboration. We have selected few themes, in 3 themes per country in these 4 pilot countries, inspired by the SDGs. And with these themes, we want to show that by working differently, foundations, the UN and governments can really be much more effective. And you can see that the range of themes is very broad, but so are the SDGs, and we see that foundations very often, because the SDGs are so broad, they very easily can find themselves and they can find their own strategies and their own priorities in this very broad framework. What is very important is that we have already, in this first year, made very important inroads that this work, which foundations in these countries have been already doing anyway before we actually even started the platform, that right now these efforts are connected to the more strategic work of the governments. This is important because obviously philanthropy would like to leverage their resources, and what we find new partners and also influence the policy making. So this has been my presentation, and I was wondering, Heather, is there anything that you'd want to add to what I have said?
I think you covered it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karolina, for the great presentation. And again, a focus on collaboration, partnership, and coordination. It was great that you pointed out that's not only all about funding, but unleashing the full potential towards the Sustainable Development Goals. And moving on to the next section of our presentation, to Lauren Bradford from the Foundation Center, I'll use a quote from Karolina that I'll have to use often, that measure what we treasure. So it's monitoring and how data is important. And now we'll see the actual platform. Lauren, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. If we can just get the slides up, that would be great.
Fantastic. Just hold on 1 second. Oh, great.
Fantastic, thank you. Anna, I'm happy to flick through the slides as well if you give me the control ability.
Fantastic, thanks, Lauren.
Okay, thanks everyone, thanks for joining us. Well, this is a perfect segue into data because as Anna and Karolina have both said, in order to achieve the SDGs, we need to be able to measure what we treasure. And therefore, we need to understand and talk about the importance of data in achieving the SDGs. So I'm just going to touch on that briefly, and then I'm going to walk you through the SDG Funders website, which is the website for the SDG Philanthropy Platform. So philanthropy has an enormous opportunity to lead the way in achieving the SDGs and global data practices. Not only the opportunity, but we need to do it. And we need to do this by working to improve our own financial and program data capacity and tracking abilities, subsequently encourage others to do the same, and then ensure that finance is being spent and resources are being used where they needed most to achieve the SDGs. So why, what, and how do we do this? Data. Why do we need data? Above all, we need data to achieve the SDGs, including the eradication of poverty. We need to be able to track financial flows of grants, and we need to measure progress. We need to help stakeholders make strategic partnering and funding decisions, and we need to ensure coordinated partnerships and effective development outcomes. And overall, to ensure that philanthropists, development practitioners, and community members are all on the same page and we're all working towards the same end goal. So how do we do this? We need to begin by thoroughly understanding country, regional, and global data context, and this means spending time in country, working with philanthropists on the ground, with the UN country team, with the government, to really properly understand what's actually happening. We need to build sustainable in-country capacity and technical skills, and that needs to be relevant, again, to what's needed and what's wanted. We need to implement context-relevant data collection systems. We need to provide platforms for and share knowledge, data, and stories. We need to encourage the adoption of a universal set of indicators that are measurable across sectors. And this is where the SDG indicators will become crucial for all of us. We also need to ensure that philanthropy is plugged into local and global data processes, and we need to use sdgfunders.org, which is a digital data and knowledge partnership portal that I will show you shortly. And what do we need to do this? Well, we need different types of data. We need transactional data to understand where money is being spent and what it is being spent on, so we can ensure effective grant making and transparency. We need program data so we can better understand who is doing what and where, so we can partner and work together and we can understand the progress along the way. We need qualitative data to tell real life stories and lessons learned and really connect in the work that we're doing. And we need data on the outcomes of our work to track development progress and measure whether the programs we are implementing are actually having an impact. and whether we're on track to achieve the SDGs. So I'm now going to, if I can get this to work properly, which I think I can, show you sdgfunders.org, which is the website for the SDG Philanthropy Platform. And SDG Funders was launched on the 24th of September, only not even a month ago yet, at the Ford Foundation during the UN General Assembly. So just bear with me while I try and bring this up on the screen. Okay, here we go. So I hope you can all see the website now. So at the moment I'm just on the, excuse me, on the home page. And I'll just briefly scroll through the homepage, but the purpose of the SDG Funders site is to demonstrate the contribution of philanthropy to the MDGs and pave the way for greater and more intentional participation of foundations in realizing the promise of the SDGs, and essentially to make data on philanthropy investments more accessible, to track progress, find partners, and to tell stories about effective collaboration efforts. So you can see here we talk about what development goals are, and then we make the transition from the Millennium Development Goals through to the Sustainable Development Goals. I just want to click through here briefly, and you'll see that at the moment we have the 17 goals listed. And in the coming months, we're going to essentially start to build a baseline SDG data, which will make more sense when I show you the actual content of the site. So if we click on goals here, you see the page and you see the list of the Millennium Development Goals and the Sustainable Development Goals along the top here. So just to touch on the Sustainable Development Goals first, what we will do and why the data element is so important is we will build a baseline based on grant data that we have to date, as we've done with the Millennium Development Goals, based on a specific year data set. And we'll do this with the UN so that we can then, over time, start to add in additional financial flow information to the SDGs. We can talk about this more later. But as you can see here, we have the Millennium Development Goals, and at the moment we're on the country page. Some of you have probably also already been on the website, so I won't spend too long on it. But here you can see foundation funding globally, the amount of money that we have recorded, but that is obviously not all grants information, and a lot of it is US, which is why there is such an onus on us working with other countries to be able to build these data sets. So we can see here on the global site, if we click on Sub-Saharan Africa, for example, that this amount of money, $6 billion, went to Sub-Saharan Africa through approximately 15,000 grants. And if we scroll down here, we can see the distribution of funding by MDG and by official development assistance to MDG. So essentially the transaction data, the SDG funders aligns the grants made by US and, like I said, a number of non-US foundations to the MDGs over the time period 2002 to 2012. Then the ODA data is tracked against the MDGs over the same time period, and here you can see the relationship between the two. Now I'm going to go to a goal, so we can now click on a specific goal and see the funding aligned to the goal. Sorry, I'm pausing here. I'm trying to sort of recall my actual notes and control the website at the same time. So here you can see at the global level, 12% of the funding that we actually have recorded in SDG funders has gone to the maternal health goal. So we can see here again, if we focus on Sub-Saharan Africa, $814 million approximately, or 1,100 grants on the goal for maternal health has gone to Sub-Saharan Africa. We can also show the ODA funding in comparison to this, which shows a really interesting contrast. Then further to this, we can focus on a specific country. So let's go to Kenya, because it's one of our pilot countries. And you can see here, we're specifically still on this maternal health goal, and you can see the foundation funding and the ODA, and you can see the total amount of foundation funding to the MDGs. If we scroll down, you can see the change in funding over time, ODA compared to foundation funding. And also, we've included the Human Development Index indicators, which is a quick way to see country-level progress as a result of the MDGs. And the HDI isn't necessarily as comprehensive as the MDG agenda, but it is universally accepted and it's withstood the test of time. From here, I just want to quickly show you a little bit more about what we have on the Kenya page, for example, which if we go to a closer look here, we can better understand, again, the work that we're doing in Kenya specifically. And Arif Neki, who is our point person in Kenya, will be updating this information and really building this page out further. Also within SDG funders, we have this excellent reports section, which has become a real knowledge centre, and we're going to build this over time. And again, you can start to filter reports by goal, by region, etc. And here we can see we have 12 reports as they relate to Goal 1 and Sub-Saharan Africa. Then we also have a community section, and the community section is really where we encourage you all to participate and get involved in the website. So we have a discussion section. We have case studies that we've written for each of the pilot countries, for Colombia, Indonesia, Kenya, and Ghana. We also have a section where we focus on the partnerships, and obviously we really want to populate the different partnerships that are coming out of the platform and building in country. And we also have different posts and blogs, and I really encourage everyone who's on the call on this webinar to start to join in on the different discussions and different pieces of this website. So I just want to very quickly touch on what this all means and the next steps and the opportunities and challenges, because as we've all said, we'll soon transition to the new SDG framework that provides far greater opportunities for foundations. And we need to do this because the SDG agenda is broader and more comprehensive and combines economic, social, environmental and governance goals, as we've touched on. And also because the SDGs are not just about developing countries anymore, they're universal, they're truly global, and this means not just the Kenya and the Colombia and the Ghana and the Indonesias of the world, but it also means the US, it means Australia, it means Detroit and Turin, it means Nairobi and Jakarta. And so we really need to focus this as a universal agenda, and the Council on Foundations has been very instrumental in bringing the US on board as a pilot country to this work. And so just quickly, we're also going to build a widget eventually into the website that will allow foundations to go into the site and look at which actual SDG goals and indicators are useful to their work, so they can start to track and measure their own work.
Thank you so much, Lauren. And that's a great presentation. It's very interesting to see how we can compare the data and information. And one question we have is, what are the data sources? Where are they coming from? Different databases, or collecting information from grassroots organizations or governments?
So at the moment, the data source is based on Foundation Center database that we already have. In the US foundations either report their data to us, or it's provided publicly through the IRS. However, what we are really encouraging governments, grassroots organizations, NGOs, philanthropy globally is either if you do have data that you would like to provide us, then we would obviously welcome that with open arms. And as I said earlier, there's the focus on building capacity. So where data doesn't exist, we can build that capacity to an end goal of being able to share data, to be able to have data in portals such as SDG funders.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. Very exciting challenge. And just to remind you that we're opening up for questions, so you can send any questions through the chat box here to me, Anna, or Wing's office, and we'll ask the questions to our presenters. And we have another one. It could be, I guess, either Heather or Karolina, asking about the pilot countries. The said you are expanding to new countries, so.
Shall I answer that?
Yes.
This is Heather. Some of the countries we're thinking of, Lauren already mentioned the United States, so that's pretty much definite. We're very interested in expanding in both Brazil and China. We have a meeting on the SDGs in Brazil coming up in November, and one in China. There's an emerging markets philanthropy meeting in November, and there will be a session on the SDGs there. So those are two opportunities to introduce them to new countries. Just to say other countries that have expressed interest, but we don't have the necessary group of partners or funders yet, include Italy, the Netherlands, and Singapore. And we'd be very interested in, we're also considering Zambia. So I think that's the next list coming up. But we welcome more ideas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heather. We're getting new questions here now. A very hands-on question to our presenters. So, Anatoly from Brazil is asking, how can philanthropic organizations like the Institute of Climate and Society can be part of the platform? Because they're specifically interested, clearly, on the SDG 13 related to climate change. So how can local organizations be actively part of the platform?
Maybe I'll take that one as well. If we have not launched in a country, it's still very possible to join either global events or go to events in other countries, or simply begin to use the SDG Funders website, or indeed contribute materials to the website. We would really appreciate either. I know, Anna, you're based in Brazil, so if we were going to launch in Brazil, it would be fantastic to include that network within it. It's interesting, we've seen a bifurcation in the donor community between climate change and development historically, and so when we did our large event at the Ford Foundation in September, we specifically had a roundtable on climate change. And there really is a growing interest, and we hope that more climate change and environment funders will join the platform in the months to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. And it's a kind of follow-up question, actually, from Karolina. Now, what does it take to launch the SDG platform in a specific country, or Europe, for instance?
I guess I'll take that as well, and then I'll encourage Karolina or Lauren to take the next one. Really, one thing is simply resources, because the three implementing organizations, UNDP, RPA, and the Foundation Center, have a limited amount of bandwidth right now to do the work. So whether it's us or our partners, we just need support to cover time and travel and convening costs and so on. So at least a modest amount of support, which might go to a number of organizations. And eventually, we want the support not to go to core costs of the platform, but indeed, as Karolina has mentioned, also to specific collaborative activities. But even more important than resources, of course, is just interest. And so we think if there are, say, 4 to 6 organizations that are very enthusiastic about starting in a new country, that's really all that's needed. Because what we've seen is that once the ball gets rolling, others really join in. So we're looking for real leaders who have the interest and the time to spend on the project. Right?
Oh, wow. So you might have already kind of volunteers in Brazil. So just say they'll be happy to join the platform here once you come over. this one is for Lauren, actually. Are there any plans to kind of land the work of collecting data and building capacity around data at the local level? I know there's some work around that, so if you could tell us a bit more about it.
Great question. Yeah, there absolutely is. This is the thing, we can't just talk about building capacity but not actually, through our own work, not address it. So the next part of the work through the platform is, as Heather and Karolina have both mentioned, projects and partnerships and essentially delivery on the ground. And so for the data capacity side of things, in the pilot countries, my colleagues at Foundation Centre and I are going to spend some time in country. For example, let's use Kenya as an example, in Kenya over the coming months, and start to work more closely with local philanthropy, global philanthropy, the UN country team and the government to better understand the data context in Kenya, what exists and doesn't exist in terms of if and what sort of data is being collected, existing data collection systems and infrastructure, whether networks exist already, such as the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, and start to get a better understanding of what's actually happening on the ground. And then we're going to put together trainings and tools based on what we learn in country with the range of partners on the ground, and then deliver training and provide ongoing technical support so we can build this capacity to get to a point of effective, high-quality data collection and sharing.
And we have a kind of follow-up question for you, Lauren, from South Africa.
Yeah.
That's, first of all, I think that's a wonderful presentation. That's great.
Thank you.
So if you could say a little bit more about the definition of foundations in countries where grant-making is not the dominant form of philanthropy. So that's one question. And also, if the country pages include local philanthropy or just kind of cross-border giving?
Okay, sure. So the first question around definition, well, that's an interesting question in itself, and it's a question that comes up in many meetings that I am in and discussions that I have all around the world, whether it's in Europe, the US, African countries, my home country, Australia, and obviously that varies because some foundations are grant-making, mostly in the US, and others are operating mostly outside the US. And so when we talk about foundations and philanthropy in the platform, we're actually taking a very broad definition for the time being. So we're wholly encompassing. And if there comes a point in time when we need to narrow that focus, then we can do that. In terms of the country pages in SDG funders, so we're happy, I mean, at the moment we've built out in more detail the 4 pilot country pages, and that's the approach that we're taking because we have the resources to do that. And so we have the ability to really put in as much information as we would like and as the country coordinators for the pilot countries feel relevant and necessary. Then over time, as more pilot countries come on, then obviously we'll do the same. At the moment, the pilot country pages focus primarily on that country, but the great thing about this website is we've only released it, publicly 3 weeks ago. So now is a really useful time for us and going forward to start to have new ideas and feedback on how the site works or doesn't work, or what else you'd like to see it do and what else you'd like to see in it. So I love feedback and new ideas on it.
That sounds great. So we have kind of homework for our attendees today so they can send their feedback.
Exactly.
Thanks, Lauren. We have a couple of questions. One is on engagement. That in Italy, for instance, they're finding it hard to engage their members in considering the SDGs relevant to the country and not just to developing countries, for instance. So how that's important for developed countries as well. And that's one question. And another one, if there are any current partners and strategies in China.
Heather, maybe you can respond. You're very much in demand, Heather. Maybe you can respond about the universality of the agenda, because it's really super important. I think it's actually the universality of the agenda, if you ask me, is probably the one most important transformative aspect of the Sustainable Development Goals, which I think will be much more interesting to see how the rich countries will change their policies with regard to the SDGs. But Heather, you know more specifics on that.
Yeah, so just to start with the question about Italy and developed countries in general, the most important thing is that people start to get exposure to this idea that there are sustainable development goals, which some people are now calling global goals, because maybe that's more appealing to audiences everywhere. What we have found is we've begun talking about this with Italian foundations and foundations really across Europe and the US. And once they hear about it and see how it might link to their own priorities, there is interest. There's a couple of ideas going on. One is just the question of inequality, because that's certainly a very large issue in the US, but I think increasingly in Europe. And then, of course, there's also the issue of migration and the situation of migrants. So some of these, this will really call into question how we're using our resources across everyone in a given country. We found that one way in might be with cities. One idea we've had in the US, and we've talked about it with a couple of people in Italy, is if you took cities where a mayor has made a commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals, and for example in the US, the mayors of New York and San Francisco recently did that. That is one way in, because once they make the commitment, they're then going to need some partners and some ideas about how to actually achieve that commitment. Another one is we might take a theme, for example, early childhood development, which is really an issue in countries across the world with very few exceptions. So that's a theme that really resonates with the universality, and so work on that might work as well. Coming to the question of China, we have had discussions with a number of individual foundations, and the China Foundation Center is certainly interested in this. I was in China last month discussing it with a number of people, including the United Nations system in China is also very interested. So we think, depending on what happens in our meeting that Lauren and I are planning on attending next month, we could definitely get a growing amount of interest and therefore perhaps launch there next year. But of course, this is always done. We need government partners, UN partners, and civil society partners, as well as foundations in any country where we launch. So some preparation work will be needed. Thanks.
Wow, the plans in China sound very exciting.
Can I just add something? I just read a very interesting piece of information today, is that the Swedish government has just recently announced their own plans of how they're going to mainstream the SDGs in their own policies and networks and national development plans. And it is a very inspiring way to look into this, because it's probably one of the first sort of leading actions on how governments such as Sweden do it, not just in their overseas development assistance framework, like many others have already done, but it really, they have done assessment of what the SDGs mean for their energy policy, for their economy, and social welfare and understanding of inequalities and so forth. It's very inspiring.
Oh, thank you, Karolina. That indeed is very inspiring. We'll have questions about lessons learned from the pilot projects, but I think since they are at the beginning, that's probably a question for follow-up webinars, and there will be follow-up webinars. So if you're interested, just stay tuned on WING's website and the SDG platform, because we'll be hosting for future webinars about the topic. And if you're not on our mailing list, just send us a message now or email, and we'll send you information. We'll have a final question for our presenters. That's about an engagement once more. So how to mobilize, or if you have plans to mobilize individuals and also an issue-focused initiatives, such as the Global Partnership on Education or Ending Violence Against Children, so individuals and these issue-focused initiatives.
I'll start just with a quick comment on that. We certainly want to use a theme-based approach as well as geography-based approaches, and education is a very important one. We've had a discussion already with the International Education Funders Group and with a network here in the United States called Ready Nation. So we care very much about that. So anyone who's interested should contact us if you'd like us to pursue some themes. And how to get engaged, I would say just write to our website, go on sdgfunders.org, and we can follow up on whatever you're interested in. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, especially to our presenters. And do you have any final comments? Lauren, Karolina?
It's Lauren here. I'd just like to say thanks to everyone for joining today, and we'd really like to work more closely with you all. And remember Karolina's line that we can measure what we treasure.
I have one more comment, which is that the biggest difference between the SDGs and MDGs is that SDGs is for everyone. And really, they will be successful, surely, if all of us get engaged. And foundation philanthropy have this wonderful ability and capacity to translate these frameworks into really action at the grassroots and individual level. So that's a big challenge. But if we can have as many people around the world engaged, that will really make a huge difference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. That was fantastic. That was a great webinar. Thank you once more to our presenters. That's a very interesting topic. And as I mentioned before, we'll have follow-up webinars, so stay tuned. So we'll keep you posted on the developments of the project. If you have any questions, my email is on the screen right here. So Anna Pinho. So just drop me an email, and you'll be emailed the video of this webinar, and it will also be available on WING's website. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good day.